let's kind of wrap up whoever's sharing now and bring it back. Wonderful. So I really appreciate that you take the time to share with one another and talk with one another, right? That's part of what we're here to do today. And I do have presentations and PowerPoints and all the things, but we're going to spend some time today with you having the opportunity to break these things open a little bit more, to really share with one another what this means for you in your life and your heart first. And then for whatever ministry it is that you've been called to and that you serve in. For my purposes, can I just get really quickly sort of a survey of where you all are? So if you are working with high school students, would you raise your hand? If you are currently serving high schoolers. Wonderful. Middle school. God bless you all. Elementary. Beautiful. Wonderful. Okay, how many of you are in a Catholic school primarily? And how many of you are in a parish context primarily? Awesome, wonderful. Okay, that's helpful for me, thank you. So as I mentioned, I was 15 years I spent doing ministry primarily to middle school and high school students. I always say I was a youth minister, confirmation coordinator, DRE, religious education, janitor, all the things that go into that in parishes, in parish life. It was fantastic, and I loved it until the Lord called me out and into the ministry that I'm doing now for Burning Hearts Disciples. I'm also, as I said, a wife and a mother, and I want to take a minute to introduce you to my family because I spend a lot of time actually sharing stories about my family as a part of the talks that I give. So this is us just on Pentecost. This is our family on Pentecost. My daughter, Elizabeth, she was confirmed on Pentecost, so we're very happy about that. So that's my daughter, Elizabeth. She's 16, and she will be a junior next year. My son in the blue, Isaac, is 13. He's going to be an 8th grader. Then my husband, Tony, is a public high school principal. And then Vinny, my oldest on the end, is 18. He just graduated, so the last 2 months have been insane, and is actually going off to the Army National Guard. August 2nd, he goes for his basic training, and then after that is going to pursue criminal justice. So that's his plan. The picture that you see over here on the right, that's my husband ice fishing. Whenever I come south of like Kansas, I show pictures of my husband and my kids and my family ice fishing. Last time I was here, it was February. So this is a picture that he had sent me like the day before I gave the talk in February, right? For those of you who are not from the north, like I am, or aren't familiar with it, the lakes freeze over. They drive their trucks and four-wheelers and everything else out on the ice, drill a hole, and fish. I do not do this activity. I hate to be cold, which is why do I live in Wisconsin is a great question that you could ask me about that. But this is what they do. They all winter long, they are out on the ice in their little shanties with their little portable propane heaters catching fish. Yeah, I know. This was last weekend. My husband and I also fishing in the summertime. Well, spring. I mean, we did have a hot week this past week, but usually for us right now, we're in like the 60s. That's amazing for us, by the way. We love it. And our kids, we live across the street from the public high school that my kids attend, and I will tell you, they wear shorts all year round, even when it is wind chills below zero, 10, 15, 20 below zero. These kids are still walking to school in shorts. It makes me crazy, but anyway, so that's my family that I want to share with you, like I said, because I tell stories about them, so then you can kind of get to know them just a bit. Burning Hearts Disciples is the name of the ministry that we run, and that I am the executive director of. BurningHeartsDisciples.org is our website. I tell you that now because I will forget later tonight or later this afternoon. And one of the things that I do is all of my slides And some of the resources that I'm going to mention, or different things that we'll talk about, prayer experiences that we're going to do later together, this stuff is all available to you, for you to use. I remember having been a youth minister and a teacher, and I was always, borrowing and stealing from everyone around me. So I want you to know that some of the stuff is up there already. Some of it will go up after today, simply because who knows where the Holy Spirit's going to take us exactly. So, but the slides will be up there, some various resources that you can use for yourself or for the students or families that you work with. You're welcome to those. Right on our homepage, there's an events box, and it says June in Diocese of Lafayette. So you click on that. It will get you all the things. I'm going to ask that you give me until till Friday to get all the slides and things up on that website for you, simply because I have to leave really early tomorrow morning. So I don't know if I'll get it up tonight, but by Friday it'll be up there for sure. All right, so we're going to talk this morning. We're going to start big picture and get more specific as we kind of move through the day today. You have a schedule for the day. I will tell you my schedules are ish schedules, all right? But I promise you that we will do lunch at 12:15. Okay, and we will end at 2:30. I'll have Chad come up for closing prayer and dismissal at 2:30. But the rest of it, I just ask for your flexibility depending on how things go and where we're at in the day. We might do things a little bit shorter or longer in terms of the 3 topics, but we're going to start big picture for sure, and then get more specific and more practical as we move through. So when I say big picture, this is what I mean. How many of you are familiar with Simon Sinek? He wrote a book, okay, 1 or 2 of you. So there's a book that he wrote called Start With Why. He was a business guru and consultant. And one of the things he talked about is that before we do anything, he says in business, and I'm going to say before we do anything, we need to actually ask ourselves why. And he suggests asking why 6 times. Because we need to figure out, why are we here? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? What's our purpose? What's our identity really about? Because that is where we're going to inform everything else that comes out of that. So if we don't have that right, everything else that comes out of it is going to be skewed or off or wrong, or have a little bit of a twist on it that maybe we don't want. And so we really need to make sure that we're grounded in our understanding of our identity. And since, we're here as Catholics and as volunteers, as priests, religious lay people, I don't like the term lay people, by the way. Just the baptized, okay? We're baptized, because that's where our mission comes out of. And so when we think about why are we here? Why is the church here? Why does the Catholic Church exist? Why does the Catholic Church exist? It's important for us to actually take some time to break that open, to make sure that we understand it well. Because if you are a 7th grade math teacher, but you're teaching in a Catholic school, I know your why feels like, to teach 7th graders math. To hope maybe some 7th graders have some understanding of math when they leave, to improve their understanding slightly, or make sure that they don't fall below proficient on the standardized tests that we have to give them. Whatever your rationale is, that's the easy first layer of why. But when we really dig into it, because we are working in a Catholic context, because we are, either employed by or volunteering in Catholic schools and Catholic parishes, then the why of the Catholic Church actually needs to be at the center of everything that we do, of who we are in our ministries and in our roles. And so we have to answer these questions, Who are we? Why are we here? What's our purpose? I think it's particularly challenging for us in the United States to answer these questions as a Catholic Church, because we can look at a lot of what the church does and think that's why we're here, So the church is here to serve the poor. The church is here to heal the sick. The church is here to instruct, The church is here to all the different things that the church does. We can say those are why we're here. But when we look at the church coming to the United States, way back when, I don't know when it came here in Louisiana, but when we look at when the church actually came, missionaries came to the United States to found the church, What was their goal? It wasn't to form Catholic hospitals and Catholic school systems and Catholic warming shelters and Catholic soup kitchens, and right? That's not why they came. They came for one reason. To bring people to Jesus. That was it, right? That was their goal. That was their mission. And then the reason that we have all of these other services that exist is because we have recognized, and they recognized early on, it is awfully hard to introduce people to the person of Jesus if they don't know how to read. Because the primary place that we can encounter, one place, is in the scriptures. And if they don't know how to read, it's harder. And so we're going to start to teach them how to read, how to think critically, how to do all of those things, because that will actually help them to encounter Jesus. It's really hard to get someone to fall in love with Jesus if they are dying, if they're bleeding out on a battlefield, if they're, right? So we need to actually take care of their immediate need in order to be able to give them the space and the freedom and the ability to encounter the person of Jesus. It's certainly hard. Any of you who have ever worked with people who are homeless, right, or hungry, it is awfully hard to get someone to care about Jesus if they don't know where their next meal is coming from, if they don't know where they're going to sleep tonight. And so the church creates soup kitchens and warming shelters and homeless shelters and all of these social services, not for their own good, and also not just so that we can feel good about ourselves serving the poor, but for a purpose, to say if we take care of people the way Jesus has called us to, it is actually easier and they are more disposed to being introduced to this person of Jesus. And so Catholic schools should look different. Catholic hospitals should look different. The secular world does all of these things. All of the services that the Catholic Church offers, the secular world also offers. So we have to ask ourselves, what makes us different? I was a Catholic school kid. We moved around a lot, and there was a stretch where we didn't have Catholic schools when I was in middle school, but every other time I went through Catholic schools. And the Catholic high school that I went to, which will remain nameless, I will tell you that what makes you different was that they were a college prep school. That's what made them different as a Catholic school. It was not about the faith. It was not about evangelization or discipleship or helping people grow in relationship with Jesus. They were the college prep school. That's what set them apart. You see how important it is for us to make sure we understand our why. No matter what level you're at, no matter what grade you teach or subject that you're primarily focused on. Now, that does not mean that you should be beating every kid that walks into your classroom over the head with the Bible, right? Or like, do you know Jesus, right? I'm not suggesting that. There's a process and there's a way that we go about doing this that helps dispose people to that. But if we remember our why, we're going to be more fruitful. And I think part of the reason that the church in the U.S. is failing, I'm not going to get into all the statistics. You've heard them probably. You might even know some of them. But if you weren't aware, the church in the United States is failing. Our numbers are dropping. Before COVID, they were already dropping, right? COVID just accelerated the fall off the cliff. And I mean numbers of every kind. So baptisms, weddings, confirmations, funerals. Think about that for a second, right? Catholic funeral numbers are dropping. Why? It's not because less Catholics are dying. It's not even because less people who are Catholic who die would care about having a funeral. It's because the people who are left to do the funeral don't care about having a mass for the person who has died, right? So all of these numbers are dropping. We're falling off a cliff. On the one hand, that's bad news, of course. That's bad news. We want the church to grow and we want people to fall in love with Jesus. On the other hand, I like to think positively. I think this is fantastic news. You know why? Because it means we have permission to do things differently and to do things radically differently than the way we've been doing them before. My dad is he works in our apostolate in our ministry. He's a former executive for Kraft Foods. So when I tell you things like, I love cheese as a Wisconsin girl, that actually comes to me naturally. He was the vice president of the cheese and dairy group. okay? Like, I was raised on cheese. I love it. But he says one of the most profound things he ever heard in the business world came from Roger Enrico, who was the CEO of PepsiCo for a while. And Roger said that small changes to small things are a waste of time. Small changes to small things are a waste of time. Big changes to small things are dangerous because they give us the illusion of progress. Big changes to small things are dangerous because they give us the illusion of progress. Big changes to big things are what change the trajectory. So I'll give you an example of a dangerous change. I am the secretary trustee at my parish, my home parish. And just after COVID, kind of when people were starting coming back to church and we started getting back to some of the things that we do, including, having actual papers and worship aids and things like that, and the collection basket. We had multiple meetings about whether we should move from the long-handled collection baskets to the past collection baskets. The Finance Council advised Father that the statistics show that a past collection basket raises more money, and so he was all for it, and so we did it. And the ushers revolted and hated it, and everyone in the parish hated it, if you listen to them, right? Everyone in the parish hated it, so 3 people called the office and complained, because that's how that goes, right? And we had 2 more meetings to make the decision to move back to the long-handled baskets for now. Small changes. It felt like a big change, right? It felt like a really big change to people. And it is a big thing. I mean, what we do at Mass, right? All the things that we do at Mass are big and important and huge. But this was such a small change, and we spent so much time on it. And then it ended up not even in the end actually changing. And everyone at the end of that last meeting was patting themselves on the back, saying, oh, we listened to people. We gave them what they've asked for. I'm like, no, we wasted our time. Wait, everyone's time. I don't think actually most people care about how they receive the collection basket. But because our numbers are fine, what's the worst that's going to happen? This is me. I have no authority here in your diocese, but I'm going to claim some anyway because I'm behind the microphone. So this is me giving you permission to try things different. Giving you permission to be creative, to think outside the box, to do things that have never been done before or never been tried before. Stay within the fence of the Catholic Church, right? We got a huge playground surrounded by a fence. Stay inside the fence. But anything else, try it. What's the worst that could happen? You might fail. We're already failing. All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about today, are some things to be thinking a little differently. Little things that you can do, right, in the context of your day, but big things as well, so that you can be advocates in your parishes and in your schools for some significant changes that might actually help us live our identity a little bit more completely, a little bit more fruitfully, a little bit more consistently. Because that's really what we're here for. That's what we're about. So what is our identity? Well, you've heard it twice already this morning, right? The Great Commission is who we are called to be. Jesus did not say, go and make active, well-formed citizens of the United States of America. Like, no, right? He did not say, go and make engaged parishioners. Go and make volunteers for the fish fry, right? Like no. Go and make disciples. That was his mandate to us, to make disciples of him, to make disciples of himself. That's what his mission to us is. That's who we're called to be. That's what we're being asked to do. You always, you hear about, right, when someone is dying, their last words are so, well, you hope, right? People often assign a lot of meaning to people's last words. These were his last words. right before he ascended into heaven. This is what he told the disciples. So it's their mission and it's our mission to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's our primary goal. Everything else we do is to serve that goal. That's a pretty significant shift for some of us. And it's a pretty significant shift, especially the longer you've lived in the context that we've been in. It can be a pretty significant shift to make. But imagine the difference that will happen if every student who walks into your classroom, your mission is, can I introduce them to the person of Jesus so that they will become his disciple? And if they already know Jesus, that my mission is to help them grow in their relationship with him. No matter what else you have going, no matter what standards or curriculums or lesson planning or any of that, right? That your ultimate mission is that every kid will leave your classroom further along that journey of discipleship. The video that we watched earlier, he kept talking about, right, lifelong. Listen, I'm going to be real with you. You don't have lifelong accompaniment with these students, right? You have semester-long or maybe year-long accompaniment, and then they move on. For a lot of you, they move on. That doesn't mean you can't still have a relationship with them and with their parents and things, but your ability to influence them is usually limited to a school year calendar. So make the most of that school year calendar. And keep what you have, right, in the forefront. If every teacher in your school does that, then those students will leave your school disciples of Jesus. It will happen. If every teacher, if every school in your diocese is doing that, imagine, right? Kids moving from elementary school into middle school, and what follows them. You have middle schools, right? Okay, sorry. Like some places I go, they don't have middle schools. We have elementary, middle, and high as three separate, intermediate or whatever, right? But imagine if they move from elementary school into middle school, and what follows them is a plan for their faith development, for their faith journey, an awareness that when they show up as incoming 6th or 7th graders, whatever grade your middle school starts at, that when they come into that school, someone is there to meet them and knows where they've been already so that we can help them grow and take the next steps. And the same with moving from middle school onto high school. Right? Those kids if we're that intentional, they will grow on their faith journey, for certain. This is part of who we're called to be. All right, so don't take my word for it. I'm going to tell you, the popes have told us this, okay? Going all the way back to Evangelii Nunciandi, which was written by Pope Paul VI. He said, when really answering this question, who are we as church? Who are we called to be? What's our role? What's our job? Evangelizing is, in fact, the grace and vocation proper to the church, her deepest identity. She exists in order to evangelize. That's the whole reason the church exists. It's not optional. Now, some of us see that and go, I don't want to do that. It makes us nervous because we have preconceived notions of what evangelizing means, of what it looks like to evangelize from other people we've seen, other experiences that we've had inside the Catholic Church and outside the Catholic Church. We have a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses in our area, and one of my husband's favorite things to do to me is when they knock on our door for him to turn and yell, "Kristin, it's for you." The last time they came, the guy had one of their books and was like, read this line from me. And it read like a scripture quote of some kind, right? He's like, read this line for me. So he says to my husband, read this line for me. My husband reads and he goes, what does that mean to you? And my husband goes, I think you want to talk to my wife. Right, like that, because it makes him uncomfortable. It makes him uncomfortable for someone to show up at his doorstep and do that. And I'm not saying that that's what you're being called to do. Because evangelization does not look the same in every context. Some people are called to literally go door to door, knocking on the doors and asking, maybe not, read this and tell me what you think it means, but is there anything you need? How can I help you? We're just here to pray for you today. right? Just simple things like that. It doesn't mean standing at the street on the end of the corner outside the farmer's market shouting at people. It doesn't mean that. We had a guy that showed up at the kids' school on the sidewalk wearing giant sandwich board signs and carrying giant poster boards that said, "Ask me why you're going to hell." And I remember when I first saw it, I rolled my eyes. And the more I thought about it, honestly, it like made me angry. It made me angry because I was like, this is why we get a bad reputation as Christians. And does anyone come up to you and say, "Please, would you tell me why I'm going to hell?" No, right? That's not what we're here for. That's not what we're about. So I'm not saying that you have to do it the ways that you've seen out there, but I'm saying raise your hand if you're baptized. All right, those of you who are not baptized, no problem. There are many priests right in these buildings. I'm just kidding. We're not going to baptize you today. Right? That's okay if you're not baptized, all right? I want to say that right out. It's okay. You don't have to be. We love you. We want you here. We want you a part of what we're doing. But friends, you also need to know who in your buildings, who that you're working with, right? It's not just the students that we're called to evangelize. It's our coworkers. It's sometimes our supervisors. It's our friends. It's our neighbors. It's the parents of the kids that we get to see day in and day out, right? Everyone we are called to evangelize. Everyone. That's our mission. All right, so that's what the Pope said a while back, that is our deepest identity, our grace and vocation. All right, so I always have to look at the date, 2012, the bishops of South America got together for a conference on the new evangelization. They got together to say, what is this whole new evangelization that we're talking about, that we've heard coming down out of the popes and in different church documents? What does this mean? And they had kind of their own little synod and then released a document that were the results of their synod. And that document is called the Lineamenta. That's what they named the document. The Lineamenta document was what came out of that. Now, we should know, or you should maybe be familiar, it should perk your interest to think that there is a certain someone who was a South American bishop in 2012 and is now the Bishop of Rome, right? So Pope Francis was a part of this when he was a bishop of this Lineamenta, this synod on the new evangelization. And one of the things they did is they looked at what would happen. What would the effects be if we really lived out our call to evangelism? If we really lived out our identity as Catholics, as a church, what could that mean in our communities, in our parishes, in our schools, right, in all of our contexts? And there were three primary things that they came out of that with. And the first was revitalized parishes. They said parishes would be places that were full of missionary activity. Was the phrase they used, missionary activity. So that the parish is not a place that we come on Sunday to go to Mass and maybe get coffee and donuts afterwards, and that a couple of people, usually over the age of 70, show up maybe more frequently than that to pray the rosary and or do Bible studies. Right? But that our parishes would actually be places that were living and breathing this mission. That the parish became a place where we go as Catholics to be fed spiritually, physically, emotionally, right? All of that in community so that we can go out and evangelize in the world. Notice, Jesus also did not say, bring all of the people to me, bring all the people to you so that you can evangelize them, make disciples, right? He said, go. Go. Evangelization does not happen primarily inside our four walls of our school or our church. It happens primarily outside of those walls. That's assuming the people inside those walls are themselves disciples. That's what was new about the new evangelization. It was not what we were called to do. It was not who we were called to be. It was who was our primary audience. The new evangelization was about doing it with a new group of people, the people who had been catechized and sacramentalized and never evangelized. I want you to think about that for just a moment. What was your experience like of becoming Catholic? Did anyone talk to you about a friendship with Jesus? I can tell you no one did for me for years. That was not a part of it. It was about knowing the things and doing the things, right? I believe for a long time that the faith was like this treasure in a box somewhere that the bishops had the key to. And we just had to protect it there and keep it there and maybe learn a little bit about what was inside that box, and that would be wonderful and good, and that's what it meant to live the faith. When really living the faith is, our faith isn't a thing, it's a person, right? And living the faith means living in relationship with that person. So revitalized parishes that will come out of this work that we do to really shift gears here, it's going to make some serious changes. Instead of seeing parishes where numbers are falling, we're going to see parishes where numbers are growing. And not growing because we are cannibalizing people from other parishes in town. That's not growth, right? I want to be really clear about that. I don't know if you have that problem here, but there's some other places, particularly in the Midwest, that we work, where the new pastor comes in, right? And he's maybe younger, maybe does a different form of liturgy that they like better, or has really good homilies, or who knows, right? Or maybe they do make changes to their youth ministry program, or right, whatever the case might be. And all the parishioners from parish A now move over to parish B because they really like the priest over there. Or a new priest comes in and everyone at parish B does not like the new priest, and so they all leave and go back over to parish A, and the parish that's getting all the new people is like, look at how we are growing. That's not growth, that's cannibalism, all right? So when you're bringing in, whether it's new students into a school or new parishioners into a parish or new families into a program, where are they coming from? If they were already Catholic somewhere else, that's wonderful. You have an opportunity, right, for this soul to help them on their journey of discipleship, but we cannot say that that's growth. Growth is new people who did not previously know Jesus coming to know Jesus. That's growth. That's what we can see if we really live this out. The other thing they said we would see is revitalized faith. A revitalized faith. In Mission of the Redeemer, John Paul II said, in the church's history, missionary drive has always been a sign of vitality, just as its lessening is a sign of crisis of faith. Missionary drive, right? That when we're really actually reaching out and evangelizing other people, it raises up our faith. It helps all of us feel stronger in that. Have you ever had that experience when you have that moment, right, with someone where it all clicks? It all finally is coming together, right? And they have a kind of a breakthrough, an epiphany, whatever the case might be. And it makes you feel affirmed, right, in your own faith, in your own understanding, in your own appreciation of this. Absolutely. Like our faith is lifted up in community and with one another. So when we really live this well, we're going to see a revitalized faith among our people and inside of ourselves as well. The last thing that they said that we would see is an increase in unity, which I today feel like is the one that we maybe need the most. We have so many divisions, and the divisions are only getting wider. It used to be the divisions between the Protestants and the Catholics, right, that were the big thing that when it came to faith division, that we would talk about and try to wrestle with and try to overcome, and that's not where we are today anymore, folks. It's not our divisions with other denominations that are the problem. It's our division with people who are so outside the faith that they think we have nothing to offer, that we are deluded, crazy, right? The opiate of the masses, right? I've heard people call religion that before. Like, it's that, and even worse, it's the divisions inside of our church. It's the divisions among Catholics about what's right, what's best, who's right, who's best, right? All of that. The social media and the digital landscape is an incredible opportunity, but we're messing it up. because we're allowing that to just bring out more division. And I think it's because we don't live our identity on social media. All of us as Catholics, I mean that globally, right? We don't really live our identity. That my purpose here, whether it's here today in front of you, whether it is in a small group at my parish, or whether it is in a Facebook group, right, or on my Instagram account, my purpose is to evangelize. That's my purpose. My ultimate mission is to help people, to dispose them to and encourage them and inspire them and invite them into relationship with Jesus. One of the things that I tell confirmation classes all the time now when I talk to them is, like, go look at your last 10 posts on social media. But it doesn't just apply to teenagers. It applies to us as adults, too, if you're on social media. Look at your last 10 posts on social media. Do they live out who we're called to be? Revitalize parishes, revitalize faith, unity. Do they live out the sense of mission and introducing people to the person of Jesus? I'm not saying your posts have to be about Jesus all the time, right? But are we living that kind of life that makes people go, wow, they're a little different? We're in a new time in the church right now, a time we've not been in before, and we're going to talk a little about this later, but there's a fantastic book called From Christendom to Apostolic Mission. Super short, very easy read. One of the things they talk about is that we're moving culturally in our world from a place where Christianity was just sort of bred into every aspect of our culture. That didn't mean everyone was Christian, but it was just sort of there everywhere, to a time when it is not there everywhere, right? When Christianity is actually countercultural in some pretty significant ways. And one of the things that the author of that book talks about is the early church in Rome, right? That was apostolic mission, right? And they said one of the things that drew people in to the church was the way the Christians loved one another and loved the outcast. And so the Romans would leave babies outside the walls of their church to die, right? If there was anything wrong, or they just didn't want them, or there wasn't the right time, wasn't the right kind, had any kind of defect or illness or whatever, right? They would just leave them outside the wall of the city to die. That was their culture. And the Christians would go and rescue the babies that were laying outside and bring them in. And the Romans would look at them and go, why? Why would you do that? It didn't make any sense to them, because it was just so not a part of who they were. But that why would you do that, was so profound for them. It actually drew them in. It's one of the reasons that they, it's either Paul or Peter. Now I'm going to mix up my references, right? It says, always be prepared to give an answer when someone asks for the reason for your hope. Always be prepared. When you do something that is different because you're Catholic, when you live differently because you're a Christian, and someone looks at you and goes, why would you do that? Right? Our answer as people who are evangelizers, who are living this mission, should always be, because I love Jesus. Because I love Jesus. I want you to know that this is an important thing for those of us who are educators and catechists of any stripe. This is incredibly essential for us. So those of you who've heard me talk before have probably heard this story already, or this analogy already, right? But we have a problem sometimes in the church of catechizing before we evangelize. We want to teach kids about Jesus before we introduce them to who he is, right? They don't know him. We're just teaching them about him. When we do that, it's no different than a history class, right, or math class or science class. It's no different. It feels no different to them. It felt no different to me as a kid. Religion class was the same as all the other classes. It was a class I had to go to learn about things, to answer on the test, so I could move on. That was what it was all about, right? We are called actually to evangelize first. The documents of the church say the definitive aim of catechesis is intimacy and communion with Jesus Christ. The whole reason we teach people religion classes at all, any kind of catechesis you do, Catholic school, parish, adult, whatever it is, the definitive aim is intimacy and communion with Jesus Christ. When we catechize people who are evangelized, we ask them to be intimate with someone they do not know. And that's the lie of our culture today. You can be intimate with anyone. You don't need to know anything about them. You don't need to know their name. You don't need to know them at all. We have a responsibility to make sure that we are introducing them to the person of Jesus. Now, God is good. He's amazing, and the Holy Spirit works. And so those of us who were catechized first, right, it becomes real at some point often. Like for me, right, I learned all this stuff all the way through school and had some profound encounters with the person of Jesus that lit all of that knowledge that I had had on fire, and that made it all make sense. Right? And there are people who have intellectual conversion, right? They come into the church and to relationship with Jesus through study and reading, but that is not the norm, and it should not be the norm. So the analogy I give is this. How many of you are bed makers? You make your bed in the morning. You're wonderful people, I'm sure. I do not make my bed. Not only do I not make my bed, I am philosophically opposed to bed making, all right? Because my ultimate goal at the end of the day is to get back into that bed as soon as is humanly possible. And if I have made the bed in the morning, that hinders my goal, all right? I am opposed to this idea completely. My husband is a bed maker. And not only is he a bed maker, he believes absolutely 100% that the world would be a better place if everyone made their bed. A year ago, last year, his graduation speech at his high school was all about make your bed. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. You have much better advice to give. Not that. Right, so I don't make the bed. Now, as you can imagine, my husband and I have been married. It'll be 20 years this August. That caused some challenges in our marriage early on, because he doesn't just think like it would be nice, right? He is a firm believer in everyone should. And I am a firm believer in no, I am not going to. And so we had lots of debates and battles and stuff over it. But I will tell you, over the last 20 years, I have grown into someone who on occasion makes the bed. But why do I make the bed? Because I love my husband. I make the bed sometimes. I'm not even close to perfect about it, right? I make the bed sometimes because I love my husband. And because we do things for people we love, just because we love them. Even things that we don't agree with or don't like, right? Or don't understand. Sometimes we do things for people we love just because we love them. That's it. Now, if you are not a bed maker and you, like me, are philosophically opposed to the idea, I could spend an entire day, and believe me, I could, an entire day, and I could give you all of the rationale for why Tony Bird says you should make your bed. I could show you the clip of his graduation speech talking to his students about making the bed. I could give you a biography of his life and tell you about what a great guy he is and all the good things he's done. And so this is why he's got some, right? You should listen to him because he's kind of amazing, I think, right? He's got some great stuff to say. I could do all of those things. We could spend all day. I could give you a whole afternoon seminar on the Tony Bird method for bed making. It's a whole thing. I could do all of that. We could spend all day on it. And if you weren't already, before you walked in, disposed to making your bed, how much difference is that going to make in your life? None. You don't care. You don't know him, and you don't love him. Now, if you met him and got to know him and became friends with him and listened to him and he told you maybe you would, I don't know, right? If you got to know him, you might change. I know that my kids sometimes make their beds. My oldest son actually stopped sleeping with a sheet. He just, he's got the fitted sheet and then the comforter, that's all he sleeps with. He goes, because then, Mom, if I feel like it, I can throw the blanket up and then tell Dad I made the bed. Like, you're brilliant. I can't do that because he sleeps in this bed. Right. But this is my point, right? When we talk to kids about the faith, when we tell them about Jesus, when we tell them what a great guy he was and all the wonderful things he did, and when we tell them about his incredible teachings, and we do all of these things, and then we say, so, you should live your life like this. You should do X, Y, and Z. Those kids look back at us and say, I don't know him. I don't care. And in some cases, they are philosophically opposed to the way Jesus has asked them to live their life. We live the way we live, or at least we should, live the way we live because we love Jesus. And because even when it's hard, and even when I don't want to, and even when I don't understand, and sometimes even when I disagree, because I love him, I try to do the things that I know make him happy. Because that's what we do for people that we love. We do things that make them happy because we love them. Now, imagine teaching morality from that perspective instead of understand all of the church's teachings, right? And understand where they came from and why we teach this. No. My kids, we have this conversation a lot because they go to public school, then go to public high school. They run into all kinds of things, right, that are opposed and contrary to the way that we live and the way we believe we are called to live. And I struggled at first when they would come home and ask about this stuff. I'm like, I do not know how to answer this question. I don't know how to answer it in a way that doesn't come across as like, well, they're just wrong, right? And super judgmental. I didn't know how to answer it in a way that could actually help my kids be able to have those conversations in positive ways or be an example, right? To lift them up to live this mission a little bit better. And so we were talking one day, and some particularly really struggling topics came up, and I remember having one of those. Do you ever have those moments where you have the, like I say, the dart prayers to the Holy Spirit, where you're like, Lord, help me. I don't know what, Holy Spirit, help. Like, I don't know what to say, right? And it's a good thing I did, because as an educator, I can over-explain, I have been told, on occasion. Use more words than are necessary to try to explain something. But in that moment, I was so, I think I was more disposed because I was desperate. Like, God, I don't know how to answer this question. And this is what we told him. My husband and I both looked at them and said, we live the way we live because we love Jesus. Why would your friends live that way if they don't love him or know him? Nobody would. Some of the things we do, why would you spend an hour at Mass that, let's be honest, you probably don't understand most of what's happening every single Sunday when you'd rather be out fishing or hanging out or sleeping in or all of those things? Why would you do that, right? Why would you do any of the things that we do? Why would you live the way we live if you didn't love Jesus? Because obligation isn't enough. Guilt, it's not enough. Not anymore. It was for my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, when we lived in Christendom, when that whole way of thinking pervaded everything around them, that worked, but it doesn't anymore. And so today, that's my answer to them when it comes to those questions. Why do we do this? Because we live this way because we love Jesus. And some of the people that you know and your friends that don't live that way, it doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them bad people. We believe that the way that we're called to live, because we love Jesus, not only makes him happier, but because he loves us too, he calls us to that because it will make us happy, right? And more fulfilled and more joyful in life. And so that's why we choose, but it's because of this relationship. And if they don't have that, why would they choose to live that way? And so then the question, right on the heels of that becomes, so what are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about that? My youngest son has a friend and a family member that he prays for every single day, and his prayer is that they would know how much Jesus loves them. Every day. Because if they knew, things would be different. If they knew, things would be different. That has so much more effect. That is so much more fruitful than live like this, follow these rules, or you're going to hell. That's the guy with the sign outside my kid's school. Nobody wants to hear that. It's really easy to turn that off and shut that out. When we remember who we are, and we remember what our purpose is, we remember our identity, that all of this is about our call to invite people into relationship with Jesus. It makes everything that we do so much easier, so much simpler. Both the way we're called to live and the way we're called to form the students around us that we have that impact on. And these are the things that we'll see. So Chad mentioned earlier, right, and posted in that Facebook group about these normals. What would it look like if we lived this way? What would it really look like if all of us, I'm not even going to say all of us, all right? What would it look like if 50% of your school, 50% of your parish were bought into this mission and really trying to make it happen? Not getting it perfect, not doing it all right, but really trying to make it happen. Sherry Waddell, in her book, Forming Intentional Disciples, she has this list of normals, she calls them. These are the things that would be normal. That would be normal in that school or in that parish community, right? It would be normal for people to have a living, growing relationship with God. How do you know that that's not normal? Because when you're in a staff meeting, the priest or deacon always gets asked to do the prayer. Why does the priest or deacon always get asked to do the prayer? Well, one, because it's just easier. And two, because, they're professional prayers. That's their job, right? But you see how that just perpetuates it's not actually normal for any of us to be able to offer up prayer anytime. We just need to let the professionals do it. Or if it's outside in your daily life, right? If there is no priest or deacon present, you get asked to do the prayer because you are the one who works for the church, teaches religion class, right? Like whatever the case might be. Volunteers. You're the one who goes to Mass on Sunday. So clearly you will offer dinner prayer. That happens to me all the time. It is normal to be knowledgeable about the faith. My niece and my goddaughter, is going to be a senior this next year, when she was 5, her parents were talking to her about, what you want to be when you grow up. And they were talking about all the different people in their life and what they do and what they are and as careers. And my sister is a nurse midwife. And so it's like, well, mommy's a nurse. And daddy, my brother-in-law actually is a dueling piano player for a living, which is awesome. It's really fun, yeah. Daddy plays piano. Right? And Uncle Matt works on computers because he was a IT tech at the time and did fixing of computers for a company. And Uncle Tony, my husband, is a teacher, right? And my niece asked, "Well, what does Auntie Kristin do?" And my sister chuckled internally and was like, "What do you think she does?" "Well, she's a nun." Why? Because it wasn't normal in my now 5-year-old, right? In my 5-year-old niece's context, it wasn't normal to be someone who talked about your faith, lived your faith, cared about your faith, right? Like was knowledgeable about your faith. I was the church person, so in the 5-year-old's mind, church person and a girl means none, right? That was her context. It's knowledgeable. It should be normal to know what your charisms of service are and to use them. It should be normal to know that you have a vocation and a mission given to you by God. And it should be normal to be actively engaged in discerning that vocation. It should be normal to have fellowship of other committed Catholics available to you. Other people who are trying to live the same way you do. Other people who love Jesus and live the way they live because they love Jesus. It should be normal to have those things in our lives. I want you to take a moment. I want you to look at this list. And I want you to think, which of these is most normal in your school or your parish? Last normal on the list. The last normal on the list. It should be normal for the local parish to function consciously as a house of formation that empowers and enables Catholics to do all of these things. Now, I know some of you are in Catholic schools. I'm going to tell you, it is not normal for the Catholic school to be the house of formation where this happens. It should be normal for the parish to be the house of formation, and for the school to simply be another ministry of the parish. Now, in our area, we don't even have parish schools anymore. It's all system schools, Catholic schools, right? So we have like the Lourdes Academy system, and we have Grace, which is I don't even remember what it stands for. It's one of the Catholic acronyms, something to do with Green Bay. That's what the G's for, right? But it's like the Green Bay, whatever, Catholic education something, I don't know. But it's their Catholic school system. And we have ACES, which is the Appleton Catholic education system in our area, right? Like it's essentially its own school district, but it's Catholic. I don't know if you have that here or not, or if you have parish schools. But do you know why we've had to go to that up by us? Because we weren't getting our mission right. When we had parish schools, we weren't getting them right. They were not serving as a ministry extension of the parish because we weren't looking at our Catholic schools or our parishes as places where we should be evangelizing. We weren't making sure that these things were normal and that our parishes were houses of formation of this. And the biggest thing that we were not doing was educating anyone, forming anyone in any way, shape, or form other than children. The only people we spent any of our time, money, or energy on were the kids. I know that you are all here because you love children. I shouldn't say that. I hope you're all here because you love children. If you don't, the Lord may be calling you to discern a different vocation, right? And children can be powerhouses of evangelization in the right context. They absolutely can. And children can be disciples of Jesus. I know there are people who think that only adults can do that, and I will say that is not my experience. Children can absolutely be disciples of Jesus at their level of understanding, right? And hopefully grow into that, whatever. But, and here's the key. Those of you who are working with children now already know this. I spent 15 years doing youth ministry and religious education for middle schoolers and high schoolers. I had them for maybe 2 hours a week. There is nothing I can do in 2 hours a week that cannot be undone in the other how many hours a week that they have. And the rest of their life that they live, in their home life, in their school life, right? Even if you're in a Catholic school, there's actually nothing you can really do in 8 hours a day that cannot be undone in all the rest of their hours outside of school. I told you my husband is a public high school principal. His big thing that he's the most passionate about right now is actually, as a public high school principal, forming parents. He said, I feel like we need to offer parenting classes. He goes, but I have to figure out a way to offer it where I don't call it parenting classes because I don't want to be condescending, but these people don't know how to parent. Now, he's a principal, so he's got, right? But he said they don't know how to have conversations with their kids. They don't know what to talk to them about. They don't know how to manage technology in their homes, right? All of this is, and it's not because they're bad people. It's not because they're bad parents. They don't know what they don't know. And the world is so different today than it was when these parents were even teenagers, right? It's so different. When I was a youth minister, I had to learn the latest social media, right? It was just when social media was coming out, which I will forever, ever, ever be grateful to God for the fact that I did not have social media until after I graduated college. It wasn't even an option. It wasn't around. But when I was doing youth ministry, I had to know where are the teens, right? They're on these social. I'm gonna date myself. I had Zanga. I had MySpace, right? Like way back in the day, okay? I did all the things for 15 years up to Snapchat. Snapchat came out when I was leaving youth ministry. And I remember looking at that and being like, oh yes, I don't have to learn this one. I don't have to know this one. It's just coming out and I'm leaving youth ministry. My kids aren't old enough for that. And this is what I said to myself. And these things come and go so quickly. By the time my kids are teenagers, it will be something new. Well, wouldn't you know, Snapchat's one of the ones that decided to stick around. So then I had to try to learn it after I had been out of learning all this new technology for so long. It is hard to be a parent today. It's hard to be a parent of teenagers, of children, of all of that. There's so much in this world that is not stuff that we understand. When my son was 3 years old, he was going to Catholic preschool, my oldest. And I remember 3 years old, 4 years old, he's coming to Mass with us on Sunday, and all of a sudden I turn and look at him at one point, and I'm like, he was saying the Our Father with us. And I was like, where's that coming from? What was the closing prayer they did every day in preschool? Was the Our Father. His preschool teacher intentionally did mass prayers as the prayers that she did with the preschool class. She's like, because I know most of them aren't going to mass, but the ones that are, it'll reinforce what they're hearing at church on Sunday. I was a religious education person. I had a degree in this stuff. I knew all the things. It had never even occurred to me that my 4-year-old son could learn the Our Father. And I know this stuff, and I know my faith. And it never even occurred to me that that was in his capability. I took child and adolescent development classes. My undergrad was in teaching. You would think I would know this, but no, it didn't even occur to me until I saw that he already knew it. And I went, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. And if I didn't know this stuff, and I do know my faith, and I do know education, and I do know child and adolescent development, at least to some degree, then all the rest of these parents that are out there, how do we expect them to know anything about what their kids are capable of, or how to interact with them or relate to them, or any of that, right? And so if you are working with kids, I'm telling you right now, you have to also be working with their parents. You have to. You have to. Now, that does not mean you personally have to do all the work, right? But we need to have an awareness that these kids are not staying with the faith because, like Jonathan, or I think it was Jonathan in his talk, or it might have been something Chad said, because they need 5 adult mentors to stay in the faith. 5 adult mentors to stay in the faith. If you've got mom and dad, guess what? You only need 3 that are outside. The research it's out there, it's everywhere. The research says that the number one factor as to whether or not a child engages in their faith as an adult is whether or not their father engages with his faith, followed by whether or not their mother engages with her faith. Outstandingly over-the-top evidence indicates that those are, of course they are. Think about everything we know, right, about the role of family. Of course what their parents think and do is going to have such a huge impact on them all the way through. So if we can help parents along, we're going to have a lot more fruit and a lot more success. It's going to be a lot easier to help bring kids along in the growth of discipleship if it's being reinforced at home. If they are learning how to even just have conversations about faith at home. It's not easy. I will tell you, again, as someone who lives this and does this for a living, I can get up here and talk to all of you about all kinds of things. And I get home with my kids, and I say to them, guys, I think we probably should try to do some more intentional prayer time as a family. That might be one of the scariest things for me to have to do as a mom, because I know the reaction I'm going to get, and my kids do care about their faith to some degree. They do care about it, and I still am like, oh, if I say that, what's going to happen? What's the implication going to be? What's that going to mean? So we have to be working with parents. The documents of the church also, I highly recommend, highly recommend, at the very least, Catechesis in the Modern World is a document from John Paul II. Catechesis in the Modern World. He's not an easy person to read. All right, he was a philosopher, so his stuff is dense, okay? But I highly recommend at least picking through and looking for some quotes. I do a lot of document searching on the Vatican website, despite the fact that it is so horribly designed. I'll open a document and then do searches for phrases or words or things like that to kind of help me pull nuggets out at times. But Catechesis in the Modern World is a fantastic document to help anyone who's doing religious formation of any kind. But I will tell you over and over again, and particularly in that document, they tell us we're supposed to be catechizing adults. The church has told us this over and over and over again. We are supposed to be spending most of our time, energy, and resources on adults, not children. And we reverse that here. We spend almost all of our time, energy, money, and resources on catechizing children. Why should we spend so much time on adults? Why is that so important? Why is that essential? Because then they're the ones that will catechize the children, right? Imagine how much easier it would be to do First Communion prep if you had parents at home who knew that Jesus was really present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, believed that Jesus was really present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist, went to Mass every Sunday, and treated Sundays like a day that we celebrate and that we honor that Jesus Christ is really present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. And this is our day to do that. Just those 4 things. Imagine how much different First Communion prep would look for kids coming in if those 4 things were happening at home first. Then we would not feel like we had to cram everything in, right? And get them to understand in their little 7 or 8-year-old brains stuff that we have a hard time understanding in our 47 or 8-year-old brains, right? And we would know that there's going to be someone there to ask the questions as they get older and grow in their understanding, that someone will be there to answer and talk to them about it and help them understand. I remember when my son was about 6 years old, my youngest, we were in Mass, and 6 years old, right? He's like, he knows you be quiet at Mass now, right? You can't just yell things out anymore. He was pretty well behaved. But we had been, must have been talking about, in some context, Jesus in the Eucharist. And we get to the part of Mass where Father elevates, right? And then he consumes. Father does. And my 6-year-old son shrieked in the pew. He went, Mom! And I was like, what? Like, I'm like, did someone die? Like, right? Did you hurt yourself? Is someone bleeding? What? And he goes, he ate Jesus! And I was like, yup. Why? He was horrified, right? In that particular moment, like, what is even happening? And good Catholic mom in that moment, right? And I'm like, everyone's looking at us, and I'm like, because he told us to. Shh. We'll talk about it later. That was my answer, right? But it was an awareness moment for me that was like, yes, we should all have that reaction. Not only at the priest consuming, but that we get to do that. Like, oh my, what is even happening here? Imagine if confirmation kids were coming, now you're about to move, right, to 8th grade for confirmation, but it was high school. So imagine if kids who were coming into confirmation were disciples of Jesus. That's it. Just that one thing. Imagine if the kids coming into confirmation prep already knew and loved Jesus. That would change everything about what confirmation prep looks like, wouldn't it? Because now confirmation can be what it's supposed to be, which is now that you know and love Jesus, you're called to this mission too. And we're going to, right, the church is going to give you, and God is going to give you all the gifts and the strength and everything that you need to go live that mission out in your high school. Because you're 8th grade getting confirmed, right? That's going to be a totally different context than, well, shoot, we have to hurry up and get them through confirmation before they leave, or we have to cram all the Catholic knowledge in to these kids who haven't been showing up for the last 8 years to try to make sure that they understand what this really is that's happening, and try to do the entire process of discipleship in that one little window. If we really focus on adults like the church has told us to, the rest of it will become easier. Because I don't know about you, but where I'm from, RE classes are drop off. The Catholic school, well, I don't have to take my kids to Mass because they do that at school. I don't have to do this stuff at home. That's what I'm paying you for. I actually had a mom, a confirmation mom, who I was friends with when I was teaching confirmation classes. We had some parent sessions, 3 of them, that they had to come with their kid. They did activities together, and then they had to go pray together and discuss what we had done, right? We walked them through all the steps. We were sitting around a campfire one night hanging out because we were friends, and she looked at me and she said, I don't think I should have to go to these parent-child sessions. And I said, okay, well, why not? And she said, that's what you get paid to do. It's your job. Now, fortunately, another friend of ours, it wasn't me, another friend of ours was sitting there, looked right at her and said, Tracy, you're wrong. It's not her job, it's yours. She's there to help you. That's what the parish is supposed to exist for. That's what the school is supposed to exist for. To help parents, equip parents to be able to do this stuff with their kids and make up the gaps for the things parents can't sometimes do, right? or that we have more infrastructure to do with them. That's it. So if your school isn't doing parent outreach, if your parish isn't doing parent outreach, then you need to be praying even harder for the Holy Spirit to do supernatural stuff with the kids that are coming into your classroom. Because it's going to, right? Supernatural, above nature. It's going to take supernatural to overcome the natural effects of having parents that aren't disciples, who don't live their faith, and who aren't doing it at home. Again, not because they're bad people, they just don't know any different. But we really, really have to be focusing on adults as well. It's going to be a shift. I like to throw grenades, I like to say sometimes, right? Some people are like, I would like to help you with a gentle touch of a feather. And I'm like, I will hit you with a 2x4. And make sure you understand this. No, but so it's not going to happen all at once. But we can start it. We can start it at home, our own homes. We can start it by, even if you're a catechist in a parish, how are you telling parents what's happening in your classroom? And do you give them tools to talk to their kids about it at home? They might not do it yet, but at least give them tools. Because I will tell you, their kids are coming home. What'd you do today? Nothing. How was it? Fine. Good. Right? That's what they're getting at home. I tell you, as a parent who sent her kids to religion classes and to retreats and to youth group, and every time, what'd you do? Nothing. I did this for 15 years. I know you didn't do nothing. Right? So ways that you can kind of just integrate that a little bit more into the work that you are doing would be helpful, and then advocate for it on a bigger scale. Okay. We have time that we're coming up on for a break. As we have our break time, we have about 15 minutes. We're going to come back at 1:45, and we're going to get really practical on what can you do with your students that will help be a little bit more fruitful. But I have some questions up here that I would like you to think about and discuss as we have our break. All right, so what would happen if every parish member, every student, every family in your school or parish understood this? We talked about the normals. What would your parish or school look like if these things were normal? And then my favorite question, what is the biggest obstacle you see to this happening? I have to give a caveat on this one. When you share this with other people, you are not allowed to use a person's name or title as the biggest obstacle, all right? Father is not an okay answer to that question. All right, not a person's name or title, but in general, what are the biggest obstacles you see to this being the stuff we've talked about already this morning lived out? We'll come back at 1:45 and dive in a little bit more.